Once upon a time, there lived a young lady named Ngozi. She was very pretty, but life had not been fair to her. She lost her parents at an early age and has also not been very lucky with men. Ngozi was a single mother. She had a daughter named Chinwe. Life had become very difficult for Ngozi after the birth of her daughter. They lived in the slum and could barely afford to eat 2 meals a day. She was a cleaner at a restaurant, and the little she earned was barely enough to make ends meet. Ngozi had a lot of suitors, but they all disappeared when they found out she had a child out of wedlock. Ngozi was always sad and would always cry herself to sleep at night. She was tired of being poor, and most importantly, she wanted to get married as soon as possible. She was not getting any younger. She was afraid that no man would marry her because she had a daughter who at this time was already 11 years old. One day, as Ngozi went about her daily routine, mopping and cleaning the restaurant where she worked, she caught the attention of Okuchi, a wealthy man who had come in to get some food. Okuchi approached Ngozi. Starting up a conversation with her, he said, "Hello dear, my name is Okuchi. I couldn't but observe how you went about your job diligently. You're very beautiful, and I will want to be friends if that's okay with you." Ngozi, smiling and looking away shyly, replied saying, "My name is Ngozi and I don't mind being friends with you." They exchanged numbers and promised to keep in touch. From that day onward, Okuchi became a regular visitor at the restaurant. He came every day so they could spend time together, and they became lovers very quickly. Ngozi had never been happier. She was smiling more often, and she felt a ray of hope. And for the first time in many years, her life was beginning to have meaning again. Okuchi wasted no time in making his intentions known to Ngozi. He told her he wanted to marry her. Ngozi was very excited, yet filled with anxiety at the same time. She had not yet told Okuchi about her daughter Chinwe, as she was afraid she would lose him if he were to find out about her daughter. Ngozi had lost several suitors in the past because of this, and she was afraid of losing Okuchi too, as she loved him dearly. Okuchi did not only offer her his love, but also an escape out of her poverty-stricken life. Okuchi was good-looking and very wealthy. He had several cars, had a company, and lived in a mansion. Ngozi had fantasized herself leaving the slums and living in a mansion with maids at her beck and call. Ngozi stayed awake several nights, battling within herself whether or not to tell Okuchi that she had a daughter out of wedlock. Several days later, Ngozi arranged to meet up with Okuchi later that day at an eatery. "What is it, my love?" Okuchi asked, looking concerned. Ngozi, with tears in her eyes, knelt down and said, "I am so sorry, Okuchi. I have not been completely honest with you. I have an 11-year-old daughter named Chinwe. I was afraid you would leave me if you found out. Several men who promised me marriage in the past all abandoned me when they found out." Okuchi stared at Ngozi in disbelief. He stood up and left angrily. Ngozi wept bitterly. Ngozi tried reaching Okuchi on the phone later that night, but he had blocked her. For several weeks, she was unable to reach out to him. Ngozi was so devastated. She blamed herself and regretted telling him the truth. She continued her job as a cleaner at the restaurant, but she was no longer her cheerful self. She was always sad. One day, Okuchi showed up at the restaurant where Ngozi worked. He apologized to her for his behavior, telling her he was so sorry and that he loved her regardless of whether she had a child or not. Ngozi was so happy. She forgave him and they were back together again and were even more in love than ever. Ngozi introduced Okuchi to her daughter Chinwe. He loved her and treated her as his own daughter. They were all happy. After a few months, Okuchi proposed to Ngozi. She accepted and they both got married. They all became one big happy family. Few weeks later, Ngozi could be seen looking very beautiful and pacing around a mansion. So I am now a married woman and now very wealthy, she said to herself. This life is really a mystery, she said. Ngozi and her daughter's fortune seemed to have changed overnight. Just a few months ago, they were all both sad, poor, and living in the slum, and not sure where their next meal was coming from. Now, they were living in a big mansion and had maids at their beck and call. Chinwe was going to the best school in town. Ngozi was so grateful for how her fortune had changed. Okuchi, Ngozi, and Chinwe all lived happily as one big family. Few years later, one day, Okuchi came back home from work earlier than usual, and he met Chinwe sleeping on the couch in the parlor. It seemed as though she was watching the television and slept off. For the first time, Okuchi noticed how beautiful Chinwe was. Chinwe was blooming into a young, beautiful woman. She was no longer the little girl he used to know. She had developed very fine features, and Okuchi did not know when his gaze turned from sheer admiration to lust. He felt a surge of sensual desires consuming him. He headed upstairs to his room quickly, but could not get the image of Chinwe out of his mind. He felt the urge to have her, and he became very restless. After that day, Okuchi began to pay extra attention to Chinwe. Everything she did excited him, and every cloth she wore appealed to his senses. Okuchi decided to come back home early when he knew his wife had gone to the market with the maid the following day. When he came back, Chinwe was all alone in the parlor, and Okuchi called out to her to bring water to his room. Chinwe, Chinwe, he called out. Yes, Daddy, Chinwe replied. Please bring a glass of water to my room, Okuchi said. Okay, Daddy, Chinwe answered. On getting to his room to give him the water, Okuchi pinned Chinwe down on his bed and had his way with her. Chinwe cried for help. Please don't do this to me, Daddy, she cried. But all her pleas fell on deaf ears. Chinwe locked herself up in her room, crying and sad at what just happened to her. Okuchi, on the other hand, felt no single remorse. It was as if a demon had possessed him. Later that night, Okuchi sneaked into Chinwe's room at night when Ngozi was asleep. He warned Chinwe not to say a word and he slept with her again. This became a pattern and Okuchi sneaked out of his room every night to sleep with his stepdaughter whenever he noticed his wife was fast asleep. Chinwe, on the other hand, started getting withdrawn. She locked herself up in her room and cried all day. Ngozi noticed this strange behavior in Chinwe and reached out to her, begging her to tell her what the problem was. Reaching out her hands to Chinwe, Ngozi said, My daughter, what is the matter? You stay indoors all day, you refuse to eat your food, and I hear you crying all day. Please confide in me. Chinwe, after several coercions and pleas, opened up to her mother and said, Mama, Daddy has been raping me. She went ahead and narrated everything that had transpired between her and her stepfather. Ngozi, on hearing all that her daughter had said, fell to the floor and wept bitterly, saying, Ewo, Okuchi has killed me. How could you do this to me, Okuchi? Ngozi and Chinwe wept together. Ngozi was confused. She did not know what to do. She was very angry with Okuchi, but yet scared of confronting him. She hated what he had done to her daughter, but was afraid that if she confronted him, he could send her and her daughter out of the house. Ngozi had not worked in years, as Okuchi stopped her from working as soon as they got married. She only had a little money she had saved. Aside that, she had no business or source of livelihood they could fall back on if Okuchi sent them packing. Ngozi was already used to a life of affluence and luxury. She was being served hands and foot. There was no way she was returning to the slum. After several days of giving the matter a thought, Ngozi decided to turn a blind eye to what her husband was doing to her daughter, for fear of being rendered homeless. She did not say a word to her husband. Days later, Ngozi spoke to her daughter Chinwe, saying, Listen to me, my daughter. Do not say a word of what your father is doing to you to anyone else. And do not resist your father when he wants to have his way with you, so you don't anger him. You should be thankful that he chose you and not some mistress outside who would pursue us out of the house. Remember how much we suffered when we lived in the slum. We cannot afford to go back there. Please allow your father have his way with you. Chinwe looked at her mother in disgust and disbelief. How can you say this, Mama? You're being very selfish. She busted out in tears and left her mother. Ngozi felt very remorseful, but told herself she did the right thing. There was no way she was going back to the poverty-stricken life she once had. Okuchi, on the other hand, did not stop. He continued going to Chinwe's room every night while Ngozi pretended to be asleep. Things, however, took a different turn quickly, as Chinwe was no longer resisting Okuchi when he came to her room at night. Not because of what her mother had told her, but because she was falling in love with Okuchi. She looked forward to seeing him every night. Okuchi and Chinwe began to spend hours gisting and laughing when he came to her room, and became lovers very quickly. When Ngozi noticed what was happening, she became very jealous of her daughter and warned her to stop sleeping with her husband. She also confronted Okuchi and warned him to stop sleeping with their daughter Chinwe. But her words fell on deaf ears. Okuchi and Chinwe were in love, and there was no stopping them ever. Okuchi no longer paid any attention to his wife Ngozi. He now spent quality time with Chinwe, taking her out and having a good time. Ngozi became very sad. Her daughter Chinwe had stolen her husband's heart away from her. Chinwe, on the other hand, felt no remorse whatsoever. She convinced herself that she was not related to Okuchi, as he was her stepfather, not her real father. Chinwe grew tired of her mother's presence in the house, and still held a grudge against her mother for not protecting her against her stepfather when she initially informed her that he was raping her. For that reason, Chinwe devised a means in her heart to send her mother away from the house. One day, Chinwe walked up to Okuchi and said that she wanted to speak with him. "My love," she said, "I cannot continue living under the same roof with my mother. She talks to me anyhow and insults me at the slightest provocation." Okuchi looked at Chinwe shocked. "Do you know what you're asking of me?" he asked. "You are saying I should send my wife, your mother, out of this house." Chinwe looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I am pregnant and carrying your son. My mother stresses me out," Chinwe said. "It's either you send her away or I leave. It's either me and your unborn son or my mother. You choose," Chinwe said and walked out. Okuchi felt so bad. He knew that he didn't love Ngozi anymore, but he felt it was unfair to send her away like that. But seeing that he had to choose between Ngozi and Chinwe, he sent Ngozi out of the house. Ngozi was so sad. She wept bitterly as she was thrown out of her own home by her husband and her daughter, who was now pregnant for her husband. Ngozi had no money. She had not worked for years, ever since she married Okuchi, as he had stopped her from working. Ngozi had nowhere to go. She was so ashamed of herself. She had no savings whatsoever. "Where will I start from?" Ngozi wailed. As she walked through the streets, she said, "See what I have brought upon myself. I turned my own daughter into a beast. Instead of protecting her against my husband, her stepfather, from raping her, I told her to keep quiet for fear that he would throw us out from the house. Now look at my life. I have been thrown out of my home by my own daughter. I have failed as a mother." Ngozi wept bitterly. Ngozi spent the remaining of her days living in regret and bitterness. She became very poor and was without a husband again. She lived from hand to mouth. Chinwe, on the other hand, lived happily ever after with Okuchi. She had 2 sons for him and she was living like a queen. Thank you for watching this story. I would love to hear your thoughts on the lessons you learned from it. Please share with me in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this story like I did, please support my channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. Now, until I come your way again, please stay safe. Bye for now.